Folks, I'm RJ and today we are reviewing Uneasy Prey. Hi there, welcome back to Premeditated Fiction. I'm RJ Beam, and today I'm going to be giving a review of Uneasy Prey by Annette Dashofy. And this book is the continuation of her Zoe Chambers EMT cozy mystery series. It's kind of hard to call it cozy in some respects, but it meets some of the hallmarks of cozy. So, the publisher is known for cozies also. So, I guess we'll kind of classify it there as cozies. But if you've never read any of the other Zoe Chambers books, don't worry. This one is a complete standalone story. Yeah, it alludes back to some events in previous books, but it explains everything that you need to know right there. So there's no worries about maybe not having read any of the previous books in this series. And I've read a couple of them. I have not read all of them. This story picks up with our protagonist, Zoe Chambers. She's an EMT in rural Pennsylvania county. She's called to a house of an elderly woman, somebody who they've had frequent contact with, and as a result, they're kind of thinking this is going to be another ho-hum, just help this lady out with some minor problem and, be on their way kind of situation. And it turns out this lady's at the bottom of her steps and she is in, serious medical condition. Eventually, she dies of her injuries. And it turns out that there is some burglars who have been going through the community, literally targeting elderly people. I'm sure many of you have heard of some of these scams where folks will come and say they need to, read a meter, or they need to, inspect something inside the house, and they were wearing official looking garb. They're driving, an official looking vehicle, some sort of white panel van, wearing, a reflective vest, have some kind of name badge on that says, something that it seems legitimate. And so elderly folks will allow these folks in, not realizing that all the meters and everything these days are on the outside of most people's houses. There's no reason for a meter reader to come inside. The few times there are, usually there's an appointment made. There's not just a knock at the door and we got to come in. And yet these folks will then, be committing some kind of scam, some kind of theft. So, these are cases I've investigated as an officer. These are cases I've been involved in. So reading this book, it was like, stepping right into a situation where it's like, yep, I've seen this. I know people who've been victimized by this, which kind of led a really good bit of credibility to the story, because I'm sure it was, maybe not ripped from the headlines, but it could have been something that happened locally to where the author lived and realized that this could be an interesting storyline. Throughout the story, Zoe is assisted. Her boyfriend is the police chief of one of the local townships that their ambulance service covers. So it's not like, the cozy where the amateur sleuth is out there just amateur sleuthing out in the wild. There is some connections between our amateur sleuth and law enforcement that are a legitimate connection, which is something that's really nice when you're reading some of the cozies out there where they have a really good connection between law enforcement and the amateur sleuth, versus some other stories where the amateur sleuth and law enforcement have zero connection, and there are these times where they kind of hit and it's more like they're butting heads, and then finally at the end of the story it's like, oh, you were right all along, we are sorry. There's almost like that, like the police are inept, whereas in this story there is that link between law enforcement and the amateur sleuth, and both play their part in moving the story forward. Couple of little twists in the story. It's written from a couple of different POVs, a couple of different points of view, and so there's a few different points where you're really kind of thinking one person is a suspect, then you're thinking another person. Not like some crazy twists, right up near towards the end. There is still, until the final reveal of who the killer is. There's still some possibilities of a couple different folks being the killer and being involved in these thefts, these break-ins. So when the plot lines finally kind of revealed and everything's resolved, it was actually pretty refreshing. I will admit that there was one character I was dead sure that one character was behind much of this, and when it turned out that person was not involved, it's like, I was fooled. A couple of good red herrings were put in the story, and that's something I enjoy though too. Where what is the path that the author is going to take you down, and this is one where you were taking down a couple different paths, and you had a number of different possibilities, and it did turn out that one that I thought might be a possibility did turn out to be what happened. But even still, there was, right up until some of the last couple pages, there was a few different branches this could go. So very enjoyable. So if you're looking for something fun to read, definitely pick up Uneasy Prey from Henery Press, and give it a good read. Otherwise, I will talk to you again soon.